Hey everybody, hope you're enjoying Leagues 5. Today I want to talk a little bit about Equilibrium, which is quickly becoming my favorite relic ever in Leagues. Now that might surprise you because I think you've probably heard a lot of, conflicting opinions about how it's kind of a meme pick, not very strong. Obviously it's up against things like Golden God, which are also really powerful. But to me, Equilibrium has been my favorite relic, so much so that I've even chosen it on my second account, which is actually a account that also has Varlamore, so I would have access to the Golden God synergy of a Stonemason and to get all those benefits. But I actually decided not to go for that and instead go with Equilibrium once again because I found that it was so fun and it really changed how I approach the game in a way that I found to be just so unique to leagues and so enjoyable that I wanted to experience it once again on a new account with completely new regions and different relics as well. Now, if you don't know what Equilibrium does, or maybe you misunderstood it based on, I think a lot of people misinterpret it. Uh, all it does is it adds a static experience amount whenever you hit an experience drop. So, for example, and this comes out to 10% of your total level. So, for right now, my total level is 2093. So, every time I get experience, I'm adding an extra 209 to that experience drop. Now, this is really good for things where you're getting experience very, very fast. For example, forestry events, which is what I've been kind of doing recently to get a lot of experience very quickly. Now you can see here, I'm getting 717 every single time I get one of these. This might seem like a lot, and that's because there's that second component of equilibrium, which is that if something is your lowest skill, it's actually going to get double that, so 20%. In this case, it would go from 209 extra to, I guess, 418, which is essentially taking every one of these flowers from a 300 experience drop to over 700. It's quite a lot. As such, this is the part of equilibrium that I've really come to enjoy, and that's finding new, interesting ways to level your skills and get that experience. Um, in ways that you, I think, traditionally wouldn't really anticipate. And if you're curious, I'm using a Tears of Gothics tracker to like highlight my lowest skill just to see what skill is getting the double equilibrium value, 20% of my total level added to every single experience drop. And you can see I just hit level 80 in woodcutting, so now agility is my lowest skill. That's going to get the sort of double equilibrium value. And so whenever I get an experience drop in agility, it's going to get the extra 20%. And just to be clear, this does not always give experience to your lowest skill. So when I'm training woodcutting, it's not going to give experience to agility. It's only when I'm training agility, I'm going to get that extra equilibrium value. And whenever I train any skill, I'm just getting 10% of my total level added on. That, of course, is not multiplied. It's a static amount. Because it's a static amount that's added to every single experience drop, this means that any action where you're getting experience very fast, very quickly, usually very low, small amounts, is a lot better than receiving slow, big amounts of experience, which, you're not basically getting that extra 200 or whatever, how much experience you have based on your total level. You're not actually procking equilibrium as frequently as something where you're chopping very often. In this case, it would be a lot better for me to do something like Willows. I just wanted to do Use because they're a little bit more AFK. I'm still getting a lot of these forestry events that end up being my way of getting woodcutting very quickly because I'm, very quickly getting a lot of experience actions. The Dryad event's not the best one, but things like roots, things like the entlings, the sapling, anytime where you're very quickly receiving experience, it ends up kind of deriving a lot of equilibrium value from the relic and giving me my woodcutting a lot faster. Now, I've seen a lot of complaints and criticism about equilibrium, mainly that it is boring and that it's only good if you're going for like 50 mil in all your skills. And I personally could not disagree more after having played with it on two separate accounts. I can understand where these are coming from. I honestly levied the same criticisms of Equilibrium earlier this year when I ranked all the relics of previous leaks, but I don't think that's how it really feels in practice. And I just want to share my experience and perhaps convince you to give it a shot if you are potentially interested in trying out Equilibrium. So let's start with that first one, that Equilibrium is boring. I don't really agree with this because, in my opinion, Equilibrium has had more of a fundamental kind of shaping of my gameplay and what I'm doing and how I'm skilling than any other relic I've ever played with in the past. I remember when I first played Leagues in Leagues 2, I had never played an Iron Man before, and having to rethink about the game from an Iron Man perspective was a lot of fun. And Equilibrium has been the closest thing that has captured that I guess, like, first experience of leagues, first Iron Man experience, where now I have to rethink the game from, okay, well, what methods are suddenly a lot better now that I have Equilibrium instead? And after having played like hundreds of hours of Leagues 5 at this point, I'm still finding new ways to experiment with Equilibrium and trying to find, okay, well, what new methods give me very fast experience drops? Is that static amount better than whatever the more efficient method is? Playing around with new methods like that has just been a insanely fun time. I've really enjoyed it. For example, training my melee stats has been kind of this interesting game of like, do I want to use a controlled weapon? Do I want to train on controlled? As that's going to give me 4 experience drops all at the same time. Interesting methods like aerial fishing suddenly became an option because you're getting really rapid amounts of, small tertiary experience, but to 2 different skills. So you're actually getting equilibrium in both of those. Now, I had animal wrangler, so getting hunter and getting fishing experience just wasn't that good. But I could definitely see a world where I, had to start rethinking about some of my relics in hindsight. I was thinking like, oh, maybe I didn't need this one after all. Maybe I could have went with, power miner instead because, fishing and hunter, I could do pretty quickly with equilibrium. Then again, mining is also a skill that benefits a lot from equilibrium, and I was getting really good experience rates just doing things like shooting stars because the base experience you get is fairly low, so that static amount that you're getting on top of it actually ends up benefiting it quite a lot with equilibrium. Even things such as mining at Duke Succulus, there's 5 minutes of uninterrupted mining there. I was getting a very good, like almost 800k an hour, just completely AFK. Most of that coming from equilibrium, and especially if I made mining my lowest skill, so that I was doubling it. Even things like power mining iron just were really fast methods, because again, small amounts of experience very rapidly, it ends up giving a ton of equilibrium value. Now, speaking of equilibrium value, I think something a lot of people will do to kind of gauge equilibrium is just look at this experience counter that equilibrium shows. And honestly, I think this is probably the most misleading part of equilibrium and is going to give people a lot of bad expectations. Mainly, the problem here is that all of these numbers are just so inflated by your combat stats. Like, okay, I have 400 million total experience, but like 50 mil, 85 mil, 55 mil, and like 75 mil from combat stats, right? It's like very, very inflated. And same thing with equilibrium. I'm getting like 12 and a half mil hit points. Here's 6 mil in strength. Like, this doesn't really matter that much, and it's even worse if you are already 200 mil in a skill. So, for example, my main is 200 mil range experience. The equilibrium tracker actually continued to go up even past 200 mil. Every time I would do any range, it would still give me, like, it would still track as if I was getting equilibrium experience, even though I was already 200 mil. So, this equilibrium experience is bad to look at. However, it can be really beneficial to look at individual skills and see what's kind of getting benefit there and really kind of gauge how strong it is. To be fair, equilibrium is not good for every single skill. Something like rune crafting, for example, I'm not getting a lot of value. It's like 200k compared to 3 mil. Construction, again, really low. Even something like Hunter is pretty low because you're getting very big experience drops when I was doing like Chinchampas. However, for a lot of skills, it does end up being really valuable. I know that ranged, for example, because you're attacking so frequently, you can get a lot of extra equilibrium. And especially on my Ranger, this made training ranged early very, very quick. Slayer also allows you to train on very low level mobs. I know that on my main, I would kill chickens with ranged, so I was training my range fast. But on top of that, I was also getting Slayer for killing chickens. And because chickens are really, really easy to kill and they kill them very, very fast, I was still tacking on that extra, like that extra equilibrium amount to train my Slayer very quickly. And even on this account, I'm still getting a lot of extra Slayer so that you're really getting your Slayer up. And Slayer is pretty important this leagues because so many Echo bosses are tied behind a Slayer requirement. Even if killing chickens sounds really stupid, what I did with Slayer Master was I actually killed Crawling Hands early. Crawling Hands are also really weak. And I was still getting a lot of really good Slayer experience for killing them, but the reason why I was farming Crawling Hands was to farm out Brimstone Keys to get just be able to open that and get a lot of supplies for all my other skills. Other really good skills include things like mining, which we talked about again. Like you can see here, 650k out of like 2.2 mil. It's a pretty sizable chunk. Same thing with wood cutting, getting quite a bit here, especially if you account for the fact that now I'm doing these forestry events, which are adding up quite a lot. And even like fishing and cooking, obviously I have animal wrangler, so a lot of this is pretty passive, but you can see it's quite a bit in fishing as well, about 2 mil out of 12 mil. Herblore is another one that benefits a lot. In fact, I was having a lot of fun just cleaning, like just cleaning grimy herbs ends up being a ton of experience very, very rapidly. Fletching also gets a lot faster. This helped me get to Dragon Darts a lot earlier because you're getting so much extra experience every time you're doing something like broader bolts. And agility is also another one that benefits quite a lot. The only reason why this is so low is because I just basically have not trained agility at all on this account yet. I've only been lamping it, so that's why it looks really, really low. But in general, every time you complete an obstacle course, you're getting that extra one. In fact, I'm actually setting up right now my like skills so that my lowest skill is going to be agility, and that way when I go do all my agility grinds over in like the Brimhaven course, I'm going to be getting massive amounts of extra agility because every time I complete an obstacle, I'm going to be adding not just 209 extra, but I'm going to be doubling that because it's my lowest skill. So every obstacle is going to be giving me like 420. Okay, and I wanted to quickly kind of show on my main as well, which is already maxed. You can see it's up to 900 mil now, with 117 of that coming from Equilibrium, which again is super inflated because like you look at ranged, this like 30 mil that I'm getting is that I some of that is even past 200 mil, so it really doesn't matter. This 33 mil from hit points, same idea. Like it super inflates this number. But when you look at some of these individual skills, you can see a lot in agility, quite a lot in Herblore as well. A lot is coming from Slayer, a lot in fletching, and even some pretty good amounts in things like crafting, in wood cutting, in cooking and fishing, and over in mining as well. A lot from mining because I did do a lot of my mining when it was my lowest one, doing something like stars, for example. So you can see for some of these skills, like again, it is really, really valuable for some of these skills. And that's not even accounting for the fact that early game, it really benefits when your skill is super, super low and you don't have access to like any good training method. And it just shoots that skill to like 70 or 80 very, very quickly. That's the second part of Equilibrium that I found to be very enjoyable, is trying to figure out, well, what is my lowest skill going to be? What do I want to target as my lowest skill to get that double equilibrium value? And in a lot of cases, it's a pretty hard decision. Like I genuinely don't know a lot of times what I want my lowest skill to be. Um, I think right now I've been settling with agility. I might make it mining, not 100% sure yet. But this kind of creates this like secondary game of creating a buffer window that allows you to train that skill and actually get the double equilibrium value uninterrupted without accidentally, getting out of range of that. And then instead, now you have to train a different skill instead as your lowest, right? You can see here that my agility is only level 80, but my construction is also level 80. So I don't really have too much room. So really what I should be doing is training construction first and creating a bit of a buffer zone, so that I can go and train agility and agility doesn't over level. And that way, the whole time I'm training agility, it's always going to be my lowest skill. So I'm always getting that massive value because agility does benefit a lot more than something like construction does, which, yeah, it does. I mean, you're not really getting that much when every single experience drop is really, really high. Now, I feel like for some people that might be annoying having to always manage, like, oh, I need my lowest skill to be good. And I can kind of understand with that. Like, I can kind of understand that because I think, people are pretty efficiency minded. So it does feel kind of bad if, your lowest skill is like rune crafting, but rune crafting doesn't get a lot of value from equilibrium. So now I got to go train rune crafting. But to me, this actually made it pretty fun because I always wanted to keep my skills kind of leveled out. I always want to, keep my total level pushing up because again, the higher total level you get, the more static bonus you're knocking onto all of your experience drops. So you have that added incentive of actually training your total level. And I understand that if going for max in leagues isn't fun for you, that makes sense. You probably won't enjoy this relic very much. But I that's okay. I think like I don't really enjoy doing clues that much, so the clue relic just was never that appealing for me because I don't want to spend that much time doing clues, and that's okay. I think you're allowed to have different play styles. I personally enjoy maxing. I think it's a fun and interesting challenge in leagues, and Equilibrium has just made that experience really, really enjoyable. That's where I can kind of see the argument about it's only good if you're going for like 50 mil all, but I don't really think that's completely true. I think it's a little bit hyperbolic. It's still very, very good even if you're just trying to go for max, even if you're just trying to, I guess, enjoy the skilling side of leagues, there's still a lot of value that you can get from Equilibrium, namely because Equilibrium, you get access to it so much earlier. And in the early game, I think that's where Equilibrium can really shine by fixing so many of your skills. In fact, it's in the late game where it doesn't really matter as much, because I'm already so close to maxing, I already have access to all these really high experience training methods that I almost feel like Equilibrium is less interesting in the late game. It's actually a lot more fun early game when, a lot of my skills when, when I got access to Equilibrium, that's like tier 4, 2,500 points, I still had a lot of skills that were like level 6 or like level 7, right? Things like rune crafting, things like farming, even things like prayer, very low level at this point. And it was actually Equilibrium that fixed almost all of these skills. I remember some of my first rune crafting levels before you have Banker's Note or Total Recall, I would just grab a full inventory of rune essence and drop it, like the whole inventory, and then one by one pick it up and create a rune at a rune altar because every single one of those essence is giving me like an extra 100 rune crafting experience because my total level is like 1000 at the time. Same thing with like farming, even like raking weeds ended up being a surprisingly good experience, and cultivating like a crop of potatoes just because I'm getting so much experience with every single harvest. It ends up being quite a lot. Or like doing super compost, just again, really rapid, very small experience gains. They end up becoming way more efficient because of Equilibrium. And to me, this made the early game process so much more enjoyable, where I felt like once I hit tier 4, all of my skills were just like fixed. And now it was so much nicer to just go ahead and just skill whatever I wanted. And that's something I've really come to love about Equilibrium is that it fixes skills in a way that is casting a very wide and broad net as opposed to something like Golden God, which is like a sledgehammer for a couple very specific skills, things like prayer, magic, and your gold source. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that destroying one skill can be a lot of fun. I know that having like 70 mil farming on my main because of overgrown, like that's been pretty enjoyable. I get it. However, I think to me the problem solving aspect of leagues is something I still really enjoy. I like the experimental side of leagues, the coming up with, new strategies that are kind of weird. Things like, doing underwater agility with dodgy deals to train your agility. Like things like that is what I really love about leagues. And I like that Equilibrium doesn't just solve certain skills. It doesn't really automatically fix anything for you. It just gives you a really wide amount of tools that make all of your skills feel pretty good. And there's just no skill that I hate training right now. So much so that I've honestly started to not even like I haven't even completed a lot of diaries because I don't even know what I want to put my lamps into because I don't actually know what skill is like the worst to train or what skill actually feels that bad to train anymore. Even things like trying to figure out how I'm going to get all of my gold from to afford some of those tasks that do require high amounts of gold. That's still a fun part of the game that I enjoy figuring out my own answers for. Like, am I going to, do wilderness bosses and, maybe kill revs and get the gold there from Alex? Am I just going to go do raids instead and then, alch all the duplicate items and make my gold from there? Like, I like having a lot of problems that I need to kind of find answers for. And I think that Golden God just sort of takes away a lot of those problems, which is good. I think that's awesome for people who enjoy that. For me personally, I think I still enjoy trying to come up with how I want to, solve a bunch of these different issues. And I found that Equilibrium just makes that process so much more fun and really takes away a lot of the challenges or a lot of the like tedious pain points that comes with a lot of these skills and leagues. And that's why for me, although I completely understand why people are taking Golden God, I don't think it is like this just the strongest relic of that tier by far. I think Equilibrium is a really, really fun, really, really good option. And even as I've transitioned to more of like the late game now, like even if you're not using Equilibrium to like its max efficiency or whatever, it's still just a lot of extra experience, which just makes training skills, I think, more chill because you're just getting more experience. You can get your skills done faster and then go back to doing PVM or whatever. Like that's still a good and fun process for me. Like I just feel like I never have to worry about my skills not being a high enough level. And that's just as I don't know. I just think that feels really nice in leagues. It's pretty damn cool. I understand for many of you, you might be thinking, okay, well, that's still pretty boring. You're just adding more passive experience, right? It's just more passive experience to all your skills. But I would kind of challenge you with that, and I guess leave it off with this: is how many people have picked Fremenic almost exclusively because of the stat stick jewelry? There's so many cool new Echo weapons and new Echo items, but it still feels like an overwhelming amount of people decided to go with the Fremennik region, just because those pieces of jewelry are so good and they just increase your numbers by a lot. In my opinion, I think Equilibrium is kind of like the Fremennik jewelry of skilling, where it's doing that same thing. It's just straight up making everything just better. It's just increasing all of your skilling options. Um, but it's also more fun because it does open up, new options as well, and allows you to experiment with a couple of trading methods that traditionally wouldn't be very good. And now they're suddenly very good because you're getting that equilibrium very quickly and very fast. Honestly, I could probably dedicate a whole video just talking about some of the equilibrium methods I found. I know that like mini games have been really fun for me because mini games have a lot of small tertiary drops. Things like Guardians of the Rift, you're getting that small mining bonus, right, every single time. But when Equilibrium is hitting it, that becomes a lot. Mastering Mixology, you get like stupid amounts of small, like 10 Herblar experience drops, and then that all gets added with the static amount. So mastering mixology has been really cool. Even something like Temperos, for example, just the small amounts of fishing and cooking you get ended up, adding quite a bit over time. So much so that I started to really wonder if I even needed Animal Wrangler with my regions, which is really crazy. I did not think I would actually think that Animal Wrangler might not be needed, but Temperos with Equilibrium ended up feeling really good. So, and again, I'm just showing Forestry off here just because I need something to do AFK. And you can see, like, there's constantly getting these small experience drops. Like, it just, it's really nice to get like an extra 200 on everything, especially for those secondary skills as well. Like getting a lot of extra little like thieving bonus and a lot of little extra, fletching or farming or whatever the other one is. Like, that's all been really nice, and I've found that these like forestry events is really where my woodcutting experience has been taking off the most. And I can kind of just chill and do use in the meantime, and only really have to focus for like 30 seconds at a time. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Just kind of wanted to do my little equilibrium rant. I've been liking it a lot. I think it's really, really fun. I think if you're somebody who is a little bit more experienced with leagues and you enjoy that experimental side, you enjoy coming up with, new methods and just finding out like cool new ways to train skills. If that's something that appeals to you, I would definitely give it a shot. Maybe if, maybe if it's like your first time playing leagues, I probably wouldn't advise it just because it can feel a little bit complicated trying to think about how to plan it all. But yeah, I don't know. I just really love this relic. I think it's super, super fun. And I definitely think that more people need to be coming at it with a proper lens as opposed to the same like, oh, it's just boring, it's boring, because I don't know, I've just had more I've seriously had more fun playing with Equilibrium than any other relic. And I think that if I ever see it again, I think I'm going to just pick Equilibrium from now on at all times, just because it is just, I think it's just so fun. So that's all I can really say about it. Hopefully this didn't feel like too much of rambling. I tried my best to kind of compose my thoughts as best as I could. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.